Hey there, welcome to the More Miles podcast. I'm Lauren.
I'm Scott.
I'm Michelle.
And we are part of the More Miles run coaching team. Zach is not here with us today. He is working his other job for the weekend, but the three of us are here today. Our episode is on hot takes. We are going to discuss and debate some popular topics in the running community. And yeah, I think this is going to be a fun episode. I'm excited for it. Okay, let's get right into it. Actually, you know what? We haven't done an episode with just us in, oh geez, like maybe a month and a half or so. So why don't we like super quick do a catch up just on how you guys are doing, what training is looking like or not looking like, and go from there. Scott, I'm going to throw it to you first.
Yeah, all right. So I ran, what did I run? The Dark Side 8-hour
Yeah, the Dark Side
event.
8-hour.
And I hit my goal. My goal was just to run till I couldn't mathematically run anymore. So I got to 7 hours, 15 minutes and couldn't go back out onto the course. I mean, I would not have made it. So I hit my goal was just to not drop out earlier than I
So we'll talk
thought I
about
could've.
that day for a second, because it wasn't just a 7-hour run. There was kind of a little more to it.
I mean, I've run for so many years. It is by far, there's not even a close second, the nastiest conditions ever. It was really the mud was what it was. It's not a hilly course. It's a trail run, yes, but it's very runnable. But it was so muddy. It rained for probably, I don't know, the 12 hours leading up to it, and it was a heavy rain, and race started at 8, and it didn't stop raining till probably 1 or 2 in the afternoon. So it kept getting worse and worse, and the starting line is on like a little hill, a grassy hill going down. And it was just, I mean, it was like a slip and slide. You just rolled your way down. And then, so yeah, the muddiest, nastiest, rainiest conditions I've ever run in my life. So needless to say, it was
So
more of a
7 hours
slog.
on the course that day was a pretty big
Oh, yeah.
deal.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It probably equated to like 10 hours, 11 hours of drive, regular running. But no, it was good. I had fun. But yeah, I'm recovering still now.
All right.
Yeah.
Michelle, where are you at?
I'm kind of in off season, and it's really, really nice because it's a very busy season of my life, which is good to have the like low season right now. Because I feel like for a minute I thought about a marathon season, and I'm really glad I never went that direction because that would have been it would have been bad. But I just finished the Myrtle Beach half marathon, so that was my first training since being injured. And so I didn't really, that was a roller coaster of a training cycle and a roller coaster of a race. And when I shared it on social, I said it wasn't the race I wanted, but it was the race I needed. And I meant every bit of it. It was, my training was not the best for a while. And then it was really great the last 2 weeks leading up. And this will be part of our hot takes, but I was going to go in with no goal and just push the effort, see what I could do, just see where my fitness was, not expect a PR. And then the few days leading up, my watch was like showing a PR. And I was like, well, maybe. So I was kind of getting a little overconfident, I feel like. But the weird thing was the weather there was supposed to be very cold, very rainy, very windy. I went with 2 girlfriends, and each of us had a different forecast on our app, but all of it was some variation of cold and wind and thunder and awful, terrible winds, up to 40-mile-an-hour gusts. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, it's the Salisbury Marathon all over again. We're going to be back in these god-awful conditions. So we went to Walmart and got ponchos and tearaway sweats, and we're crafting that night of cutting sweatpants we could rip off during the race. And we got there, and it was hot, humid. The air was stagnant. It was the exact opposite. It was just super humid. We couldn't see a block in front of us with the humidity. So I ran a great first half, and then the second half wasn't so great, but I finished, and it wasn't a terrible time. It wasn't what I wanted, but I had, I think, a real mental realignment during the race, like where at one point I was really frustrated. I definitely wanted to quit. Didn't quit. And at the end, I was really glad I didn't, because I just kind of gave me a new perspective on my racing. So now I think this year is looking forward. We're doing a really slow build. So I have the next goal race I have is in 2 weeks. It's the Main Street Mile, and it's a super fun 1 mile downhill race. So that's the next.
Chasing some speed.
Yeah. And then we have the Taco Mile and the 5K. So like, there we go. Yeah. So You just
We'll talk
ran.
about that at some point here too, because that's a fun race amongst our team and amongst our coaching staff.
Yeah.
But we'll get to that. It's still a little ways away.
Well, you just had a marathon.
Yeah. So I think I've said on the pod before, I sort of set myself up with a 4-step process this season. And the end goal is 100-mile, but I really have focused on one step at a time, getting to that next step. So the first one was something fun. It was a 9-hour trail race. The second step was something fast. It was a marathon. Yeah, I had a really good day. I did not taper for it. It was a train through a marathon, which is an interesting way to approach a marathon. I didn't go out as like just an easy long run. It wasn't like I signed up for a supported long run. I went out there to race. I just wasn't tapered. And so I knew the numbers and the performance were going to be skewed from what I had actually trained up for because I didn't have that taper and that rest and recovery. So that was an interesting experience to go work hard for a marathon, not being entirely sure where I was going to land because of that lack of taper. But it was great. Yeah, it was great. I have no complaints about it. It was not quite as fast as I was hoping for, but I mean, in the thick of 100-mile training, I was very pleased to be able to run reasonably fast and log a 26-mile workout like that. Yeah, so it was great, and I recovered well, which I think I will always say the hard work is what builds your fitness. The way you recover is what shows your fitness. Like when you can recover well from whether it's like in a workout, like your recovery intervals in a workout, or the way that you come off of a big workout or a big week or something like that. The recovery was pretty phenomenal. So I'm feeling really good and really confident right now. I did an 83-mile week coming right off of that marathon with
amazing.
quality
Wow.
work in there. So that was like, okay, we're getting 100-mile fit. It's coming. Yeah, but I'm not quite there yet. I've got one more step. In 2 weeks, I'm headed out to the Grand Canyon to do the rim to rim to rim, which is fun, far, steep, hard. And it's going to be a really fun experience. It's very personal to me. And it's also my peak long run for the 100-mile. So, and then we're tapering. So it's getting close. Yeah. Good things. Okay. All right. Hot takes. This is what we came for. And yeah, like I said, I think this is going to be fun. So let's dive into it. Michelle, you are starting us off with our first one. What is your hot take?
Yes, this kind of tied into my story, but don't trust your watch data.
Do not trust your watch data.
Do not trust your watch data. Our watches give us so much information, which is really cool. And I want to say that trust your pace, trust your distance. In most circumstances, those are pretty correct and pretty accurate. Even your heart rate, if it's attached to a chest strap, is going to be pretty accurate. So those, go ahead and trust that. Everything else, they give you so many analytics now. Like Garmin has a body battery or recovery score, which may or may not be accurate. There's definitely been days where it says I'm recovered and I can tell you getting out of bed I'm not. And vice versa, where it says, you've had a red recovery score, you slept crappy, but I didn't, and I feel great. And if I pay attention to that, I'm not going to do my workout today because it says I'm in the red zone. But there's race predictions. That's a big one. VO2 max, your fitness age, your hill score. There's so many scores on so many parts of your life now. And I feel like they keep adding into them. And so it's easy to get lost or attached to the data and not tune into yourself. And I'm saying this as a person who's very guilty of it. It's addicting to watch your race times kind of come down during your training cycle. It's also cool to see your VO2 max and fitness score improve. And it's even, they have the hill score now, which I think is fun. I've been running more hills because I'm trying to increase my hill score to this next level, which is a completely arbitrary number. That means literally nothing, but I have to get that number 60 on my hill score. And that's what I'm going for, it's good and bad. It's helping me train hills, which is not something I know I'm strong at. So that is helping me, but watching race predictions on a daily basis is a lot like watching the stock market. It's going to go up. It's going to go down. It's going to drive you insane if you constantly are tying yourself to that. Or VO2 max, where it's an estimate. The only way to get VO2 max tested is to go get tested in a facility that is capable of doing that. Your watch is making estimates based on heart rate and pace and your age. And it's easy. It's very easy to get tied up in this data because it's addicting. It's giving you some kind of feedback and some kind of score for all the training, all the stuff you put into your training. So you want that feedback to validate yourself. But the problem is it's not always correct, and it's an estimate. I think it's a good range. Like there's a range probably of like a several minutes depending on the race, which is a lot, especially when you get into these lower ranges. But every athlete is different. Like there's people who are genetically kind of more power athletes who are going to do better at the 5K, the mile versus a marathon time. And there's people who are going to be better endurance athletes over 5K. So you might blow one set of predictions out of the water and like, oh yeah, Garmin, take that. I took 10 minutes off the marathon you predicted, which is great, but your 5K might be 2 minutes over it. So it's a general guideline. It's probably going to get you into the ballpark of what you can do, but it's not gospel. It doesn't know. I think some of them, unless it has the course loaded, it doesn't know the elevation. So it's not going to adjust for your elevation gains and losses. It's not going to change for weather. It's not going to change based on how you feel that day or how you fueled. It's a cool guideline. They're fun to watch, but they also can cause problems with your head too. Thinking like, I'm not improving as fast as I want to, or if you go out and you're racing to that versus what you've trained for, you could screw up your race pacing strategy. And if Garmin has you faster than you should be running, especially in a marathon, that's going to screw up the rest of your race. You're going to kind of bomb that second half if you're pacing off of Garmin versus what you've actually trained for. So that is
that's great advice. I think people should understand a few key things there. That one of the things we hear as coaches is people looking at their race predictors very early or even in the middle of their training cycle and seeing that the predictor doesn't line up with what they're reaching for. And I think people need to understand, for one, when you're checking your race predictor like regularly, frequently, but you're far out from your race, like you haven't done the training yet. Like, of course, it's not going to line up with the goal you're working toward because we're still in the process of doing the work to get there. I think people should also know when you're looking at that list, it gives you multiple different distances, everything from definitely the 5K. Does it give you a mile?
No,
I don't
I
know
was
that
just
I
looking
don't
for
think
my
it
race. I
does.
don't think
Yeah.
it did last year, I thought, but this year when I was looking at the mile, it didn't show up for me. So
Okay.
I don't
So
think
just
so.
5K, 10K, half and full is what we typically see on there, right?
And it can do bigger because I put like Marine Corps 50K in for this year as one of my training goals, and it did give me a prediction for it, but not in the race prediction screen. It's in your actual races screen, like where you have your races plugged in. It will give it to higher distances based on that race if you input it into Garmin Connect as one of the things you're
Interesting.
training for.
Okay.
Yeah, which I thought was
I
cool,
didn't
but
know that.
it doesn't show on that main race prediction screen.
So people should know when you're looking at that screen and it gives you those different distances, it can be reasonably accurate for the distance you're training for. So if you are training for a marathon, that's the time you want to use as your reference. And the 5K time that you see there, could you be capable of that? Absolutely. But is that what you're trained and fit for right now? No, probably not. And vice versa. You know, if you're training for a 5K and it gives you a marathon time, you know, of course, you have to do the distance, the aerobic work, the training to get to that marathon level. So know that when you are looking at those, don't look at all of them, because whatever you're not training for is not relevant, whatever number you see there. And then another one I really like to throw out is when you're on the treadmill, the data analytics are only analyzed and gathered from outdoor runs, not from indoor treadmill work, because your Garmin knows that it's not accurate on the treadmill, that the data it's collecting your heart rate and your pace, but it knows that its pace is not correct. It's collecting good heart rate data, but that your watch could show you're running an 11-minute pace when you're actually running an 8-minute pace, and it knows that it's not reliable. So if you are someone who does a lot of work on the treadmill, whether that's your quality work or your recovery or any amount of running, those runs are not going to be included in the analytics for anything on your watch, for your VO2 max, for your race predictor, for any of that stuff. So know that the more you run on the treadmill, you are doing, as Michelle said, trust your training. You are doing the work clearly, but your watch is not registering that work. It's not counting it into your analytics. So I had thrown that out. I've been doing a lot of treadmill work this winter in my injury recovery. So all of my quality sessions have been on the treadmill. So when I did that marathon last week, my race predictor was wildly off of what I knew I was shooting for, and what I knew my training was, but it was not even close because it didn't really know, it hadn't really seen and processed all of the quality work that I'd been doing indoors. So people should know that too.
Yeah, and on the flip
But they
side, like
can be reasonable when you're outside. Sorry. Go
yeah,
ahead.
no, it's fine. I was just gonna say, like I said, if it's giving you a faster time and you pace yourself to that versus what you've trained for, but the opposite's true, like you just said. Like if you were to pace off of a slower time, you're not living to your full potential on your race as well. So you're doing yourself a disservice when you know you've trained for faster.
Yeah, I would
Absolutely.
say the thing I would add is and this is what I've seen. I don't know if you've seen this. It fluctuates very quickly. So I'll add two things. One is it goes up and down very, very quickly. So, I've noticed and I've heard other athletes tell me this. It's like, yeah, I was off for a week or two, or I got an injury, and then all of a sudden it said my marathon went from you know, it's an hour slower. And it's like, well, yeah, it's gonna be predicting based on where you are right now. Michelle, to your point, it doesn't know that you're sitting out with an injury. For all it knows, you're sitting on the couch. So it's gonna
Right.
account for that. The other thing too is it also depends, and I don't know if one of you covered this, but it like if you're a competitive 5K runner and you're like, hey, I want to run my first ultra marathon, right? You may be used to a fast 5K. You're starting to train for ultras, and then 6 months down the line, you're like, oh my gosh, you look at your watch and it shows that you're so slow. You're on your 5K, and that's not my PR. Well, yeah, because you went from running really, really quick and doing a lot of speed work and a lot of intervals. Now you're slowing down, and you're intentionally being told slow it down a little bit, get used to the long haul. So that's another thing too. I mean, many of us as athletes are very competitive, both with ourselves and against others. So yeah, that's what I would add to it is those two things. It goes up and down very quickly, and watch out if you're real competitive.
It's interesting information. It's not gospel.
Right.
Okay. All right. Moving to our next hot take. This one's mine. The hot take is your run streak is holding you back. And I want to make sure that we go into a little bit of nuance here because it's our hot takes are not absolute by any means. So a run streak, for those who maybe don't know, is when you run a minimum of 1 mile every single day. And it's a streak of how many days can you build upon to get to a number. Or some people do it as like a lifelong venture. But that's the deal. You have to run. It can't be a walk. It has to be running 1 mile every single day. I actually think that run streaks are great for people who need or who struggle with consistency. And I've seen people really change the way that they're training and change their lifestyle by using a run streak. So I want to make sure that I say that run streaks have a place. If you are someone who struggles with consistency, this really gives you a structure and a goal on a daily basis to work toward that. It creates that consistency. It creates that accountability. And really, even when we're looking at, I think we all preach that rest days are important, recovery is important. Most of the time, a 1 mile run is not any more load on your body than, say, going to the grocery store or going to Target. So most of the time, doing a 1 mile run as your rest day, as your recovery can be helpful, not hurtful. The place that I start to disagree with run streaks and think they're counterproductive is the point at which that 1 mile run you're going out for is actively hurting you and actively working against you. And what I tend to see is that, like I said, run streaks are a great way to develop consistency and kind of change the way that you're training, turn you maybe from a 3-day-a-week runner into a 6 or 7-day-a-week runner. However, they become addicting. When you start to get to these 100 days, 365 days, 4 years, 5 years, what have you, you have invested yourself into this streak of thousands of days, and you can't break it. You are unwilling to break it. So I see people who are very, very sick and will go out and run a mile or inside. Now, again, the rule is it's running. It has to be a running form. You can't walk during that mile or it doesn't count by the standards. So it truly is running. I've seen people who have serious injuries. Now, I want to be clear, there's a lot of injuries that you can run through. So an injury doesn't mean rest. However, there are some cases that it does. And stress fractures, things like this, when you are really hurt and you go out and run. People who do high intensity racing and push their body to its absolute max and then go out and run the next day for the sake of maintaining their streak. These are things that are actively hurting you and working against you and decreasing your potential, decreasing your ability to train and to listen to your body and be productive. And that's where I start to have a problem with it. So I don't know. What do you guys think about run streaks?
I I had to think long and hard about it because on the surface it seems like a very, simple. It's you run streak or you don't run streak, right? But I think it really, in my mind, comes down to what is the athlete's motivation? What is their not necessarily their goals? What is their motivation, right? Is that 1 mile going to put that little extra oomph right in their training, right? Now I'm totally with you. I think that if it's really going to hurt you, right, you're bedridden with the flu, and it's really, should you really go out there for that mile in the storm? No, but I think that if it's going to get you motivated, then sure, fine, have at it. But I also think you need to understand who you are as an athlete. Like if I look at myself, I know I'm injury prone if I run every single day. I need 1 day of full rest. I absolutely need it. And if I'm going out there, even if it's for just a 2 mile run, it may be the thing that puts me over the edge. So I think two things. I think it's one is dig deep within yourself to find out what motivates you. And if that's part of it, great. But then two, understand who you are as an athlete. If you're injury prone, if you're prone to fatigue, just in your daily life, right? Like if you've had a long, long day at work and you're gassed, trying to get out there for 1 mile, right? And then you've got a race coming up in a couple of days. Like those are things you really got to think about when you're thinking about streaking. So that's my thought on the take.
I mean, I've done them. I'm going to be honest. I've done 2 run streaks in my life. They were both 100 days. I think one might have been a couple more over. Um, the first one I did, and I did it because I was losing motivation. So I think it was very useful to me because it got me out the door every day. And I was like, if you can just at least get 1 mile in. I did the Runner's World does one every year. I think it's between like Memorial Day and Labor Day or something. I did that one with that. So that was kind of fun to get on Instagram and see other people who were doing it. And then I didn't want to miss it. But that being said, I was out there sick, which looking back, this is before, I just wanted to say this was before I met Lauren. So it wasn't her approving any of this. I was dog tired, so sick, and still went out and ran a very slow mile, which was pretty stupid, to be honest. I mean, it was dumb, but it got me motivated. It got me back into training. And I think I started doing one last year, just a mile. I was like, I'm going to go do a recovery mile because I was already running 6 days a week. So I was like, what's one more day? Let's just do it. It lasted, I want to say 6 or 8 weeks. I didn't get to 100 with that one. So I guess I've done it 3 times because that one I did not make it to 100 because I started feeling injured. Things weren't snapping back. I was also 10 years older than when I did my first streak. So my body needed more recovery time. And I learned that in the very first few weeks. And I had bigger goals. Like I had a marathon PR that I wanted to get. So that was detrimental to that goal. Where the first 2 times I did do the Runner's World streaks, I didn't have major goals on the horizon. It was just fitness, go out, have fun. So I think that mile didn't do anything except get me back into the swing of things, get my routine down. But when I had bigger goals, it was detrimental. I was feeling it in my joints, feeling it. I'd go out for that run and be like, oh, I'm really tired. This doesn't feel good. And after a few weeks, it was just thrown away.
I think that's the key right there, is when it interferes with your ability to listen to your body and respect your body. I think there becomes a point that you can be so addicted to your streak that you lose that ability to listen to your body. And that's where it's a problem. I will say I've done run streaks myself too. So, not to say that there's like not a place for them. There is a place for them. I did a 365 day one, and it was a 5K a day. And 365 was my last day. I had to stop that day to cut it off. I had to break it off, and just make it, okay, we're done now. But I think, like, for myself, I'm a 7 day a week runner. Most of the time I run 7 days a week, but because I haven't defined that I am streaking for a set goal or whatever, I can run 7 days a week most of the time and have the freedom to take a rest day when I need it. So, maybe in a month I have one rest day or two rest days. Maybe I go 3 months without a rest day at all, but I am free and I have that ability to take that rest day when I need it. There's no like defined limitation on I can't do this. I need to run. And I think that's important. I think it's important to be able, once you've gotten that consistency down that you're searching for, to be able to have that autonomy to take a day when you need it, listen to your body, know that taking one day doesn't mean you're starting over or you're losing anything. I think that's highly important. So yeah. Okay, Scott, you're up next. What's your hot take?
All right, so mine is social media may be lying to you. And so what
What?
that's, yeah, exactly.
The internet's always true.
Right, 100% all the time. So where I was going with this is kind of two angles, but the biggest one is in today's world with social media, probably. I mean, I'm following a lot of athletes that I think are doing well, professional and even local, right, that aren't professional, and they're putting content out there that's positive, that's happy, and a lot of times that's product related, right? They're influencers. They're trying to push a product, whether it's a shoe, it's a clothing line, it's a fuel source, whatever. They're trying to push that, right? And it's like, oh, Jim Walmsley runs with this and fuels with this, so I'm going to go buy that. Well, two things. One is everybody's different, so it may not work for you, right? Just functionally as a product, a shoe, or nutritionally as a fuel source. That's one aspect of it. But two is they could be getting paid for pushing that product. So there's nothing to say that that product or that fuel is working for them, right? It just could be that they're making money and pushing it out there, you know, in front of your face. So that's really kind of the angle and the avenue that I was looking at to say, buyer beware is the internet, social media, it's being used to sell, to push product. Now there's a lot of good out there, right? Like you see influencers or athletes that are putting out there, they're running in a nice forest and it's a nice view and there's nice music behind it. It's inspirational, right? That's positive, that's great. But kind of beware on some of those things where you see the products and then the algorithm will start messing with you. If you follow certain athletes, the algorithm will know that, oh, you like Hoka, here's some shoes that I want to sell you. So kind of, you just again, buyer beware. And it's also just everything. I mean, there's Strava, there's Facebook. I mean, people are putting out there a lot of things, and sometimes it's overload, right? So you kind of have to sift through is, what is it that's going to be just motivational for me, right? Just to absorb that content, and what might be trying to sell me, right? And I'm guilty of it. I've had way too many impulse purchases off of seeing something that an athlete did, and all of a sudden then that product shows up at my doorstep 2 days later. So yeah, buyer
Well,
beware.
so that's not all bad. I think absolutely. I agree. But also, like, that's how advertising works now, right? Like, social media is the place to advertise. And it's a great place to discover new and interesting products, new and interesting ideas. So I think there's a lot of positive there too. But I completely agree with your caveat that just because your favorite athlete is using it doesn't mean it's the best thing for you. Try it. Go ahead and
Hmm.
try it. But that doesn't mean that that thing is the secret to the success of whatever you're seeing. Um, and also know when someone is sponsored or paid by a product, they are indebted to that product. So let's say, let's use a professional athlete, for example. They have a shoe sponsor. Typically, especially when it's a shoe sponsorship, that's a lot of money. That's their livelihood. And they are going to run in that shoe regardless of whether it's the best shoe for them. And what actually happens is that athletes will take the shoe they're running in and they will doctor it up to work for them. It's not the shoe that you're buying off the shelf at the store. Before we got on the podcast, we were talking about this, like with prototypes that you see pro athletes running in. That's not necessarily a shoe that will ever be available to you, or the iteration that becomes available to you might not be the same thing the product was wearing or the athlete was wearing. I think another place we see this, to call out a specific brand, it's pretty well known that athletes who wear Ultra, there are quite a few of them who will put a heel lift inside their shoes in an Ultra because a zero drop doesn't work for them, but they're being offered to be paid a salary, a full working salary by this shoe company. So they find a way to make it work, but it's not what's actually working for them is not the product that you're using. Nutrition is another big place. When you see an athlete that is sponsored by a nutrition company, like Scratch, like Never Second is what Jim Walmsley just picked up since you pulled out that example. Morton is another big one. They are required to appear as if that's the only product that they are using. For most people, one single product across the board is not going to be the best fit. Most people need to use a variety of different things between hydration and fueling, and even like different kinds of fuel along the way. And also, because that is their paid sponsorship, if they need something different in their personal nutrition, they are taking that product and then doctoring it up differently from what actually comes in the package to work for them. And that's what's going in their bottle. But you have no way to know or see or tell what's actually in the bottle that they're carrying. It just says Morton on it. But in reality, it's not what you're buying in the package. And I think people should understand that too. That's very, very common, especially I think Morton is a big one that we see that it has no electrolytes in it. So when you see your favorite athlete out there using it and that's the only product they're using, that's not right. There has to be electrolytes in there somewhere. They're playing with it somewhere. Michelle had brought up UCAN is another kind of popular one that people play with and doctor a little bit. I'm going to stop talking. I feel like I've gone on a long stretch here, but sorry.
No, but the way around it is just go to the feed and get a single serving of whatever you want to try. Just try it out and see if it works for you. Yeah.
Try it, see if it works.
Don't do what I did and buy a $60 case of Morton's. No, I like them. They work for me, but I remember the first time that I wanted Morton. I think it was before I was turned on to the feed, and the only way I could try it was pay a hefty fee. So anyway.
Yeah, good point. Good plug for the feed. Our athletes are sponsored by the feed. You can buy everything on their website in a single serving size to just try it, and try 20 different things if you want to see what is best for you and what combination is best for you. Michelle, you didn't get a chance to chime in on this one, sorry.
No, it's all good. You covered everything. I like the other thing I was thinking was like, when you're talking about shoes, how Alpha Flies became huge after oh my gosh, why am I like drawing a blank now? Kipchoge was supposed to break the 2-hour marathon, but that like very, they had that very, I want to say it was like very doctored. It wasn't doctored, I guess, but it was like, the conditions were optimal and he had pacing and all this other stuff going on. I mean, there's a million other things, not just the shoes, that were contributing to him doing this specific race. But the shoes he wore, like you said, they were nothing like what you're buying now, but they blew up after this. Like, oh man, if this works for him, then I'm going to put these shoes on. I'm going to break my 4-hour marathon. Your foot is not his foot. I mean, Nike made a killing off that, I'm sure, but
they still are.
Yeah, they still are. Cause I mean, I still want to try them, but
they're sweet.
Well, but even there, that shoe specifically, the Alpha Fly is a perfect example of the shoe that's on the market can give some runners a 4% benefit. It can give some runners a negative 2% benefit. It can give other runners a 6%. It's all about how you respond to the shoe. It's individual to your running form, and the speed that you're moving at and your mechanics. So even when the shoe is not the issue, it fits differently. It works differently for different people.
We have not yet seen a pro athlete yet, I don't think. Maybe I'm wrong on this. Do the new Addy Zeros, those new $600 one-time use shoes. Have you seen those?
Yeah, the world record. The women's
they
world
did.
record.
Okay, so I'm wrong. Sorry, I just hadn't seen that yet. So I was wondering when someone was going to come wear those, and everyone was going to
Yeah, so it
jump
was
on
in
that bandwagon.
Berlin, the women's world record. I
She
haven't
was wearing
seen like
those.
regular people buying those yet.
This could be a while.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and there's a couple shoes out there that are not legal for competition. They are so super that they are not. Now, legal for competition really doesn't apply to the amateur field. So you might see people like ourselves running in that shoe in a race. But, if you are claiming prize money or a podium spot, then, that comes into play that that shoe is
Yeah.
not actually legal. But for most of the pack, they're not monitoring shoe stack height and things like that. But okay, so I think this ties in really well to our next hot take, and this one goes to Michelle. What's your take?
Yes, this is another Instagram feed kind of thing, like Scott had. Diet trends are hurting you, and there's I feel like, I don't know if it's with you guys too, but my Instagram feed is filled with like a million different diet influencers. I'm sure it's because I'm always like researching that kind of stuff, but I guess in the last year I've seen carnivore diet, even for endurance athletes, because I actually even signed up for this email list to investigate it, to see what it was talking about. Paleo is another coming back around. Low carb, vegan is coming back. I feel like there's a lot of different kind of diets. Intermittent fasting is another one that's really I think that's kind of dying back out again. It was had its heyday for a minute, but all these diet trends, I feel like as endurance, I want to say this is specifically for endurance athletes. I think they can help certain people in certain situations. But as far as we're relating this back to endurance athletes, overall, they're hurting you. And I went in, and like I said, I went into this carnivore diet because that one intrigued me, like just so much, because there were so many stories, all this anecdotal evidence of people like curing diabetes, their blood pressure, their heart disease, all these things going away on just meat. And I was like, I just want to like research this for a minute, because what is that? Is it true? And there's not a lot of data, but it was all very specific cuts of meat. First of all, it was pasture raised, grass fed, very high quality meats, which is extremely expensive. There wasn't a lot of studies done on it, but when I kind of went in, I signed up for this like email class just because I wanted to read, and they were talking about someone cutting like 10 minutes off their half marathon time. And I was like, now all you've got me. Like, I really want to read about this. Let me see. And there wasn't anything other than this one story, but there's no carbs. There's zero carbs. There's zero vegetables. There's zero fruits. There's only fat and protein. And their argument is that your body can make carbs, which is true if you're not running a ridiculous amount of miles like we are, or you're not running or trying to race. I think, yes, you could go out and run. This woman, I couldn't find whether she PR'd because she maybe lost weight on this diet, which is they do this with a lot of surgical patients. They do this. It's a very strict use on getting you to lose weight before major surgery. So that's possible. Paleo's one, I feel like that's coming back a little bit. That one could be applied. I mean, there's ways you can apply that one to running. So I don't want to say that's not one that could hurt you, or you just have to do it right. And then vegan, another one. You could do it right. I don't want to say it's necessarily completely hurting you, but when you kind of adhere to a very strict set of rules in your diet, I think overall it's limiting you. You're not selecting foods that you should be eating or could be eating. These influencers are, again, trying to sell you something. They're trying to sell you their program on how to eat meat properly and be a good athlete. Their new cookbook or supplements that go with this program is another big one. Like, I know Element, which I love, is a big sponsor of a lot of these paleo, more carnivore kind of diets that kind of goes along with it. Element's a great brand, but it's paired up with some of these diets that don't necessarily work as an endurance athlete. You're not going to get enough carbs for a marathon on any of these diets, except for maybe vegan or paleo if you do some intentional work with them. Vegan, you have the protein's the issue a lot of times, is how you can possibly get enough protein without over consuming calories at the same time. So again, diet trends, a lot of times they're trying to sell you something. They're trying to get you on, it's almost like a religion, I feel like nowadays.
I was just going to say, I think sometimes they're
cult.
trying to sell you on their moral values around food.
Yes.
Sometimes it's not a product. Sometimes it's a very deep personal investment in a diet, in a
culture. Like there's a whole,
we see that a lot. I think that's,
yeah. And so it's become, I feel like even discussing it with people becomes a religion nowadays with a lot of this. Like there's so much like I align this way. It's like politics or any other taboo subject, because people are very aligned and very dead set on their trends and their diet. And I get that. If it works for you, great. But um, I just want to say use caution. Anything of extreme is
Yeah.
usually a red flag, regardless of what area of life. I feel like if there's an extreme on it, like maybe we should look at it a little more.
Yeah, I would agree and say that what I see, again, it's all through my social media feeds, is whatever that diet is. What's frustrating to me is it seems like they're pushing the negatives of what is not in their diet, right? So if it's
Mm-hmm.
carnivore, they're not only saying like, "Oh, this is what you could benefit from it," but this is why vegetables are bad for you, right? And
Right.
it's like, what in the world are you talking? Like, so to me, that's where it also gets a little bit even more complicated. It's like the audience is trying to decipher, okay, is this benefiting me? But also, what's hurting me that I'm eating, right? It's like, come on, like, I mean, is a vegetable really hurting you? So that's where I
Yeah.
kind of get frustrated and confused on. It's like it's not just what they're pushing as the benefit; they're trying to sell you on why not to do what they don't like.
Right.
Right.
Like kale is killing you. The
Yeah.
oxalates
Yeah.
in kale are
Yeah.
slowly killing you. And you're like, well, you'd have to eat like 8 pounds of kale a day
Yeah.
for the rest of your life to have an issue. Right. But they are going to
Yeah.
take that little bit and say, well, rats had this much and they died. So, you
Yeah.
know, we're not rats.
I think that is your red flag to look at when any diet trend out there has always and never statements attached to it. That's where there's there shouldn't be a time that you can't ever have any particular thing. Even soda, donuts, garbage food that we don't advocate for as like part of your regular diet, but it shouldn't be sinful and shameful if you had one of those things, and that's where your problem comes in. Um, I think I think it's worth mentioning and you brought up one example with the carnivore diet, Michelle. We see even at the elite level, athletes who have success with a lot of these diet trends. Low carb has, and especially in the past, maybe 3 or 4 years ago and a little further back. Low carb was huge in the ultra community specifically. And we do see athletes have some amount of success with lots of different diet trends, not just that one. So I think it's important though to understand what you're doing, not to just see someone and mimic, but to see someone and try to understand. Do the research before you start doing something to yourself. If you don't know what it is, don't eat it. If you don't know how it's going to what it really is doing in your body, in your system, don't treat your body that way. Like we really need to understand before we implement. But there are still currently elite athletes in the running space that do low carb lifestyle. Um, I think it's also important to understand someone can be having success and doing well, but are they actually reaching their full potential with the way that they're fueling? Um, I, I will say I have been an example of that. I used to be a low carb athlete myself. Anyone who's known me for more than 4 or 5 years has known that I used to have that lifestyle, and I had success on it. I did pretty well for a while, until I didn't, until I kind of hit a wall and like my body really broke down. Um, but you can have success there. It's just that you're not reaching your full potential. I guarantee it. If you are an endurance athlete and you are not getting adequate carbohydrates, you're not doing your best. You also need to understand the differences between men and women, that you might see an elite male athlete doing something that is really damaging for a female athlete. And so, making sure that the people you are following are people that you want to emulate. You're going to take the CrossFit athlete is not going to eat the same way as the endurance athlete. And you need to recognize those things. And you can be inspired and motivated by something that you see without emulating it, and applying it to yourself. So, make sure you understand it before you do it. Make sure the person you see doing it is someone that you want to emulate. So if they are lifting 500 pounds and you're trying to run 200 miles, it doesn't add up. And also remember that there are outliers. There are always outliers. There are always people who can take something extreme and do really well, and are probably really loud about it. That doesn't mean that that works for most people, even. There's always outliers. In fact, Zach Bitter is one of the low carb athletes out there that has had success with it, is an elite athlete. He has a podcast called Human Performance Outliers. And that's what the podcast is about, is people who are having success by doing something unusual that doesn't work for most people. So just take a little bit of a deeper dive is, I think, the overall overarching message. Don't just see and do, see and copy.
Well, I also want to say, like, if you're vegan or you have a special thing because of moral or religious issues, that's a whole different ballgame. Like, I just want to make that clear. Like, like everyone's got their moral standing, and that's something where you can probably just make it work with some intention. But yeah, just to do it because you saw some guy on Instagram isn't a good reason to do it.
Agreed. Okay. Next hot take is mine. Okay. Run slow to run fast is not true, is my hot take. We see so much out there right now. And actually, I love that it's popular. That the messaging is you have to run slow in order to run fast. This messaging is hammered so heavily and so hard because we are coming from, a lot of people are coming from a place of going out and running hard every day, and having problems with that. What we are trying to teach people is how to run slow and the benefits of running slow. Slow is, I don't even like that term. Easy is probably the better term to use than slow. It is really important to spend dedicated time in your training running easy. This is where we get recovery benefits. This is where you grow and develop your mitochondria. This is where you are innovating your muscle fibers with more capillaries. You are building a monster aerobic base. This is really, really important time. Easy running, slow running is important. However, if you only run easy and only run slow, you are not just necessarily going to progress. That's not the end all be all. It's really important to understand that a well-rounded training program that is going to take you to your best, to your upper limits, to your potential is the word I was looking for, is well rounded. It is going to include easy, slow days. It has to. If it doesn't, you're going to burn out. You're going to hurt yourself. You're not going to develop fitness. Fitness is a product of hard work plus recovery times consistency. If you don't have the recovery, you're not going to get fit. But you also have to have the hard work. We have to do the hard work in there. So if you are only running easy all of the time, you are not necessarily going to get better. Where we do see this happen is someone who has been training hard and fast only for a long period of time and has really developed that side, coming to a space. This is a lot of where the theory of MAF training comes from. Maximum aerobic function training is where you only run easy for a period of time. The people who have the most success there are people who are coming off of the opposite, and they need to take that time to develop their aerobic base. But if that's all that you do, you are not going to improve. You have to have the opposite. You have to have the hard, heavy, high working days. And you also, I don't want to talk too much on this because I know it's a hot topic for Michelle and she wants to go into it. You also have to have gray zone time in there. I think one of the things that we see commonly is either you have to run slow to run fast, or you have to do one or the other extreme. You're either running slow or you're running fast, and stay out of the gray zone. So I won't even elaborate on that, Michelle. I'll let you take it because I know you're passionate on this one. But I agree
yeah, this
with
one
you.
drives me crazy. But like, there's a lot, and I'm not going to like say names, but there's a lot of other coaching companies who are very much on this 80-20 rule. And I've read Matt Fitzgerald's book on 80-20 running, and it's a fabulous book. I think there's a lot of really great insights in there. And I don't think he's all like this either. Like, this is not how he meant, was 80% easy and 20% like super hard effort. But just knowing that this zone 3 is what they call the gray zone a lot of times, because it's not recovery work and it's also not hard speed work. It's kind of that middle ground, but it's valuable conditioning that happens in that zone 3. You still get a lot of benefit. You're getting some aerobic benefit. It's not to the extent of zone 2. You're still getting some like threshold work and some speed work, not to the extent of zones 4 and 5. You're kind of in that middle ground, but that's still a lot. Like, you're still doing a lot of benefit to your body. You're still working both systems in there. And as we said, it's a gradient. We've mentioned this before in our podcast. Heart rate zones are a gradient. They're it's not like you magically from one beat to the next go into a different zone. Your body's still kind of gradually working from one zone to the next. So you're getting benefits throughout all of your different zones in different ways. They're all training different energy systems. So zone 3 is going to require some more carbohydrate than zone 2. It's a good time you can practice some fueling on your long runs if they kind of go into zone 3, because your body's burning carbohydrate, so you can see how you react to fuel. Zone 3 is a lot of marathon running. I mean, a good chunk of your race is in zone 3. If you're running zone 2 for most of your marathon, you're not running hard enough, in my opinion. You should be at least in zone 3 at the start. I say at least because the more fit you are, the higher you can go at that number. But if you're starting out as a new marathoner, zone 3 is where it's at. Like, that's where your marathon is going to live for maybe most, but the last few miles. And even as an experienced marathoner, those first few miles at least are zone 3. So you better get comfortable in that zone to know what it feels like, how your body feels, how to fuel. If you don't spend time practicing that pace range or that effort level, you're never going to succeed at that, overall. Like, if you're only practicing easy and hard, you're never going to find that middle sustainable ground of, challenging yet sustainable. And that's what zone 3 is challenging and sustainable. I feel like I could do this for a long time, but I'm not just chilling and chatting. I'm putting some effort behind it. So I think it's a good zone to be in. It just, you don't want too much of it, because the problem lies in zone 3. It does cause inflammatory response to your bodies, which is the recovery response. So we want some inflammation. You just don't want a ton of it. So if you're not doing zone 2, allowing your body to rest and recover, and only doing zone 3, you're going to accumulate too much inflammation and you're not going to recover, and you're going to become injury prone or burnt out. So that's where it gets a bad rap. You're not maxing out and building this speed, but you're also not training aerobically. It's in that middle ground. And it's still a great place. I mean, I have a couple runs a week that are zone 3 runs, and they feel amazing. It's fun. That's the fun pace. Like, I'll be honest, that's where I'm just having a great time on my runs. Like, there's no effort
for
involved.
most
I'm not
people.
thinking.
That's your natural spot. Yeah. I think that's where a lot of this messaging came from, is because people used to, or it used to be common for people to only run in zone 3. That's where we spent all of our time, because this is like I said, this is our natural spot to be.
Yeah.
If you just go to run, that's probably where you are. The problem is doing all of the training there, but that doesn't mean that none of the training should be there. And I think you made a great point. If you are, let's say, even a half marathon athlete, you're going to spend some amount of your race in zone 3. If you are a marathon athlete of any ability, you are going to spend some amount of your race in zone 3. If you are an ultra athlete, you are living in zone 3. That's your whole day. We are not running ultra marathons in zone 2, to be clear. Like, we train at zone 2, we recover in zone 2. You do not race in zone 2. Even if you are doing 100 miles and upwards of that, you don't race at that low of a heart rate, and you don't race by heart rate either. You race by effort. And go figure, if you're going out for an all-day effort, you're going to find that natural middle ground, which is going to be your zone 3 if you were to look at your watch and track that data over time. So yeah, it's an important zone to spend some time in. And that's, to your point, that's kind of your mindless spot. Like, to be free, you don't have to run by a rigid heart rate zone or a rigid pace goal or anything like that. It's sort of the free and flexible spot to play. Scott, we totally overpowered you here and didn't give you a chance. Do you have any additions?
I would be short and sweet. And basically, I was listening to both of you talk, and it kind of just reminds me of for ultra training, for example, right? Couldn't agree more, right? Like we are racing, right? We're not racing there in zone 3, um, or zone 2, I'm sorry. But we're training to get you from point A to point B as efficiently and as quickly as possible, right? So in the training, right, we're going to be running slow some days, but there's going to be days that we're running fast, right? We're pushing the pace. And so I think that is something, athletes may think that are new to ultras, right? Or maybe stepping up to think all I'm going to be doing is just going out there and jogging X amount of miles per week. No, not really, right? The goal is to get you from point A to point B as efficiently and quickly as possible, right? Based on what your goal is. And we're going to put some stimulus in there. We're going to put some fast stuff in there. So it's not going to be all slow miles. But that's what I would add. It's already been said, but from an ultra standpoint, I think it kind of resonates with a lot of people.
Well, and that's one extra point to add there is the importance of having the variety and a
Mhm,
well-rounded program when we're talking about heart rate zones or effort zones.
mhm.
A lot of that is from a fitness, aerobic, anaerobic standpoint. But a lot of that is also from a mechanical standpoint that you need to teach your body when we are doing low heart rate, zone 2 MAF recovery effort runs, we are teaching your body to run at its most efficient. When we are doing the opposite end and we are doing high intensity hard efforts, we are teaching your body to be strong, to open your stride to its full range of motion. And then again, having that middle zone where you're likely going to spend a lot of your day, you need to get the mechanics down of
Mhm.
running efficiently and running well in that zone also. So even just mechanically having that full spread of the way that you move your body, the way that you land on your feet and absorb shock, that is all an important piece too. And you're never, if you never spend time running in that zone, when you go out for a race and then you need to run in that zone, it's going to feel foreign. It's going to, finding that pace, finding that effort is going to be difficult. So yeah, a well-rounded program requires multiple levels, not just
Yep.
one and not just one or the other. Okay, next hot take. This one is going to you, Scott, sort of on a similar theme, maybe.
Yeah. Okay. So it is that you won't PR every race. Okay, so I'm going to
What?
start off with a little bit of a caveat. If you run 2 races in your whole life, right, and the second one's faster than the first one, then yeah, maybe that counts as you PR'd every race. But if we're talking about for the majority of athletes that are building race upon race upon race, right? Now, I said it before, like we're all competitive, we want to do our best. We want to race quickly. We want to race fast, right? So in our mind, we're like, yes, I'm putting in this effort. I'm putting in this training. I want to beat my time from last time that I ran that event, whether it's a marathon, a 5K, a 50 mile, whatever the case may be. 2 paths I want to go down. The first one is that your training through that cycle could be spot on and you are primed to run that PR. But like Michelle said, you get there and the humidity's jacked up, or it's pouring down rain, or I ran in torrential mud pits, right? The elements could mess with your day, right? So you may not PR that race. The other one is that there's going to be ebbs and flows, right? Like if you're racing a lot and progressing up and up and up, you're just not going to PR every single time. Your body's going to adjust. Even the perfect cycle, you could come to that race and something just didn't click, right? And you didn't PR that race. And maybe you're off by a second, maybe you're off by 10 minutes, maybe it's more than that. That's okay, because if you're progressing up and up, it's kind of like a training cycle, right? We want to go up and up and up, and then we want to have a little bit of a downtime to rest, recover. I'm not saying that racing and PRs are necessarily the same way, but your body's going to adjust. Your body's going to at some point not PR every single time. The more you race, the more probability that that's probably going to happen. You're not going to PR every time. If you race less, it could spread out a lot. Like I've PR'd a lot recently, but that's because those are events that I haven't done in years, right? So that's a little bit kind of an example of where that, kind of you maybe could PR if you're not racing a specific event for a while. But again, I think it's one thing to remember: if you race a lot and you're going up and up and up, you're going to plateau a little bit at some point, probably. So I'll stop there and see what you guys think about that.
Yeah, I think there's another thing to consider is when you start out in any new sport, you're going to hit a ton of PRs right away. Like my
Yes.
beginners, it's awesome and it's so fun because they're hitting PRs and they're doing amazing, and it's like, it's great motivation to get further in the sport. Um, but once you start finding your fitness level, like where you're kind of approaching peak fitness, the margin for PRing is smaller. So like it's going to be harder for you to get to that next level. You're going to have to put in a lot more work to see a few seconds. So where like, when you're first starting out, you're kind of going through like basic training and you're getting your aerobic system built up and you're finding your running stride. It's easy to get those PRs at first because you don't know your potential yet. You probably haven't hit your max heart rates or your zone 4 even. Like a lot of beginners have never been in a zone 4 workout, so they don't know where they can go because they've never trained at that level. And once you kind of find that higher fitness level and you're hitting your PRs, I mean, your fitness kind of starts to plateau. I don't want to say plateau because it still can go up, but it's going up at a smaller rate than it did at the beginning. So there's always a massive amount of improvement, and then it slows, and your improvements are going to come with a lot more work behind them.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's an excellent point. That's part of what I wanted to highlight as well, is that the more experienced that you are, the more developed of an athlete that you are, the higher trained you are, the harder it is to PR. And like Michelle said, the amount of work that you put in for a fraction of time is there's a ratio there. So I think like you said, it's awesome when you are either a beginner athlete or even when you are new to coaching or new to organized training. If you've been a runner for a long time, but you've never really trained, you've never really gone through a structured training program, then you can see a lot of improvement pretty rapidly. And that gets it's very fun. It's very addicting to see PR after PR after PR. But no, and I think this comes to, for people to make sure that they spend some time thinking about their why they are doing this, because again, the longer you've been doing it, the more highly trained you are and the more highly developed you are, the less frequently those PRs become. And so it's really important to take some time and make sure that you consider why you're doing this. Are you only doing this because you love the result and you get a high off of the result? Or are you also doing it because you love to train, you love to run, you love the pursuit? And it's absolutely reasonable to have the goal to PR. That's what we're always chasing. We're always chasing improvement, of course, but that can't be the only definition of success. You have to find multiple ways to define success for yourself and make sure the reason you're here is not only for the result, but also for the love of what you're doing and how you're spending your time. I think that can be frustrating if you are putting in a lot of work and you're working really hard and you're not seeing the PR. That doesn't mean that you're not seeing results. It doesn't mean you're not getting fitter. It doesn't mean you're not growing. It doesn't mean you're not developing as a person along the way. Like, that's part of it. It's not just the peak, it's the climb, right? So I just want to throw that in there too, is you're not going to PR every race. So make sure that you have multiple layers to how you are going to define success for yourself along the way. Anything else to add on that one?
I think that was perfectly put.
All right. As someone who has been in plenty of valleys and not reached the summit, and we've all been there.
We've all been
Oh, yeah.
there.
Oh my
And
gosh.
we're going to
Yeah.
be there again, like
Yep.
you never stay at the peak. So even
Yep.
when you do get the magical PR, it doesn't stay. It's just it's a moment, and
Yep.
life
Yeah.
continues.
Then you move the bar higher. So
Right.
you just keep moving it.
Right. Right. Exactly.
I don't know where
Even
it
when
stops.
you get there.
I'm not even sure when it stops, when this game ends, but we keep moving the bar.
There's a quote I like. It's proud but not satisfied.
Yes.
And I think that kind of defines when you do reach that PR. It 99% of the time, that's not your stopping point. You just got a PR. You're motivated. You're going to go for the next one and reach more. And then again, that's where more and more quote unquote failure for that PR, for that specific goal, is going to come in.
Yeah.
So we need to know that, accept that, and that's okay.
I would love to know the statistics on how many races are registered for within a 24-hour window of PR. Like it has to be like 90% or something. Like you get in the car,
Oh
and you're like,
gosh.
yes, sign up for the
Let's
next
do
one.
it
Let's go. Let's do it now.
again. Okay. All right. Our next one, Michelle, you're going to tee this off, but I think we all have an opinion on it. Okay. What is the hot take?
Strava is hurting you. I'm saying this as taking my second break of this year alone. We're only in March. It's the first time I've ever taken a break from Strava. I'm going to be honest. I loved it. I loved scrolling through it at night. I loved scrolling through it after my runs. I've also loved trying to name every run, which is a stress apparently that I didn't know it was a stress in my world. But now that it's gone, it's taken some relief out of there. It's super fun. Like I'm going to say, Strava is a tool, so it's good and bad. It can be used, but I think for most people, it definitely is a comparison tool. And like comparison is the thief of joy. And we're all trying to do a sport we love and hope to keep loving. So like to keep joy in the sport, sometimes I feel like you have to remove yourself from there. I think my runs are still sinking in there. I mean, I didn't delete my account, but I've been off of Strava with the exception of my son's races. I will get on there to give him some kudos and his teammates some kudos after a run. But I think what it does is when you're having a bad run, part of it is like, oh man, this is going on Strava. They're going to see my heart rate was 160 on this and I'm struggling. Yeah, you can see my walk breaks and like, I'm not disqualifying any pace. I'm just saying like, as an example, I'm running slow today and I'm not going. Well, you're having an off day, which everybody has. And that's normal. It's part of it. Like, I mean, there's days where you're walking more than you're running on a recovery because you had a hard workout the day before, or you don't feel well, or you have a cold, or you didn't sleep well, or you're just not having a good day for God knows what reason. But like, there's that I have to validate it on Strava. Like, let me figure out how to name this or put a comment on there so it's validated. So like, they know that's why I wasn't on my normal pace today. And like Laura Green had on there, like, runs with Jen, like how you blame it on your friend, make sure that they knew that it was them that was slower, not you, which is terrible, right? Like we don't want to do that to our friends. But I think the comparison part of it is really hard. And then when you have those great days, it's almost like when you post something on Instagram and you're trying to see how many likes you get. So you have a really great workout or a great race. And then you sit and wait, like how many kudos am I getting from this run? And is it enough to make me feel validated? And you're looking for external validation on training that shouldn't come from the outside. It's you and your journey in your pace zones where you're supposed to be. And I think it pushes, like when we go back to one of our other topics, like you're pushing yourself maybe into higher heart rate zones than you should be on runs because you don't want to post a slow, I'm saying slow in quotes, time, slow for you time on Strava because it doesn't look good. You don't want to, nobody, you throw, I mean, some of my math runs are like 5 minutes slower depending on how I feel that day because I'm just tired and that's what my body needs that day. And it's a whole 5 minutes slower than I was earlier in the week. And that's fine. But you still feel that need to validate it. And like I said, like trying to name your runs, like is a real freaking stress. Like you want to have a clever name for this or whatever. And I've caught myself where I'm not paying attention to my surroundings. I went on like a streak for like a month where I was trying to name music lyrics on every run. And then I forget what I wanted to name it when I got home. I was like super upset because it was some song that really felt great. But I was too busy worrying about that than just enjoying myself. I know this seems so trivial and so stupid, but I'm sure we all do it, right? Like I can't be the only one that is sitting there like on a 5-mile run, spending 4 of them trying to figure out how I'm titling my run. Like how insane is that? Right?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
I've broken up with Strava a lot of times, and I'm about ready to do it again. I think it's great because I love the social aspect of it. I love to see what my friends are doing and what my teammates are doing and all of that. And it's awesome, right? And there's the kind of the competition part of it too, with local legends and grabbing a segment or whatever. But I think there comes a time, and maybe right now my time has been hit, where it's like, okay, it's a little bit of overload for me, right? Like I've got a lot going on with training. I got a lot going on with kind of my why. And so it's like, okay, maybe I take a step back, right? Because, and now I'm just talking about for me, it's like I need to focus on my training, right? Not saying that I don't want motivation in the form of, other people's running, but it's like there's a time and a place for me to focus on myself. and then to open it up and be like, okay, I'm ready to join the party again. So I think it's great, but I think everybody's got to ask, when is it maybe detrimental to them, right?
Right.
So yeah, that's my thought on it.
I completely agree. I do find it to be very performative, whether it's in trying to show your time and your pace, or trying to show how many miles you run, or trying to show how badass, how difficult the terrain is that you conquered that day. I think it's performative. And I will say, I think the community of Strava is excellent. I think it's very supportive. I think it's a great place to find community. I will say, I don't think I see a whole lot of negativity on Strava. I mostly see support and conversation and connection. Um, However, I think where it becomes problematic is usually internal within yourself. And I think, Michelle, you mentioned this, like the story that you start to tell yourself about the way your run is going because you know it's going to be publicly posted. Whereas how would that story change if nobody knew that you were running that day, or knew how far you went, or how fast or slow you went? How would that change your internal talk, your self talk? And I think a lot of people don't realize that until they disconnect. I think a lot of us are on Strava and believe that it's not affecting us in that way. Or we're not competitive, or we're not comparing, or we're not being performative. And you can't truly appreciate that until you step away and genuinely nobody is looking at your run today, and how that affects you differently, and how you talk to yourself differently. So I think that's where Strava can be problematic and can be hurtful, is more than anything in the story you're telling yourself and the internal dialogue you have with yourself about how other people might perceive whatever it is that you're doing that day, for good or for bad. And I think it can be very healthy to let nobody see what you're doing for a while, whether that's permanent or not, and just see how that affects you. I'm with both of you. I think there's a ton of positives to Strava. Um,
Um,
comparison, comparison, I think, is healthy in some ways, like to look up a race that you're going to do and see how other people performed on that course, see how someone who has comparable fitness to you ran that course, and give you some strategy into how you might approach it. I think there's a ton of benefits out. I like to be a follower on Strava. I'm not on there at all right now. I took the app off my phone, but I still have an account because it's interesting to go follow in there, even if I don't really like to share my own stuff. So I think that Strava is a positive community. It's a positive resource. But I think a lot of people are unaware how it's affecting them internally on a daily basis. And it's just something to maybe take some breaks from, and see how it's affecting you.
Yeah, and I think this is one thing I didn't think to touch on until now, but with there's kind of been a lot of attacks out in the open, but like from a safety standpoint, I
Oh,
think you need to
100.
be super careful. And I was guilty because you can't join the challenges unless you're public, right? Like all those
Mhm.
cool challenges they have, and you can't earn your crowns, I think, unless you're public. I think
Yep.
everything has to be. So if you're going to steal a segment, you have to be public. But there's a safety side to that because I usually run the same time every day, so now I'm varying my route and it's not public anymore on purpose. But I think from a safety standpoint, you need to be very cognizant of your settings and who you're sharing your runs with, especially if you're a routine runner where you run at the same time, around the same spot every day, because you just don't know who's following you. Um, you don't know who they are, even if they're another runner. I mean, they could that very well just be another runner that has ill intentions. We like to think our whole community is good, but they're not. Um, so I just wanted to just say that that could be something that could hurt you also, is being on there and sharing everything you do on there with whoever can see it.
I'm really glad you said that. That's huge. Yeah. And you're right. You can't, your maps and everything, your location, like all of that has to be public to do the interactive competitive side of Strava that people love so much. And Yeah, I can't wrap. When I was on Strava, I always had my maps blocked. I never made them public, whether or not I was running from my house. And I can't wrap my head around people who run from their house regularly and it's public on Strava. Or, like you said, even if it's not your house, but it's your routine, it's out there. It doesn't even have to be someone who's following you. They can just look it up and see, hey, at 3 o'clock, Lauren's on this trail every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And, like you said, we like to think that but it's happening. It's
Right.
happening in our community right now. So yeah, be safe, guys. If you are on there, I won't say there's no reason for your map to be public because that's where the competitions are, but just
If that motivates
be
you, be
aware.
careful. Yeah.
Yeah, be aware. Um, okay. Okay, our last one. This is a really lighthearted one, but I wanted to make sure that we mention it again. I currently am coaching a lot of athletes who are running 100 miles this year, so this was kind of top of mind for me. This hot take is: beware the chair is garbage advice. Um, this is a really popular in the ultra community, especially the old school ultra community. There's a popular saying out there. It says, "Beware the chair." That your goal when you are out there for an all day big event is don't sit down, because once you sit down, you're not going to get up. You're going to have issues. You're going to have problems. And my stance, I want to share loudly, is that that's terrible advice. The chair can save your day, can save your race, and you should use it. So specifically in like an all day long form kind of event, when you are on your feet for dozens of hours at a time, your blood flow is pooling in your lower legs, in your feet. Your lymphatic fluid is pooling in your lower legs, in your feet. And if you need to take a minute, like you're at an aid station, you need to change your shoes, you need to adjust something, someone is going to refill your pack, or you're going to have a snack or something like that, you're going to be there for a minute anyway. It can save your day to sit down for a minute and let some of that blood flow and that fluid drain out of your feet and out of your legs. So specifically, sitting in a chair like you usually would is not going to do a whole lot for you, to help you or to hurt you, either way. But one of the best things you can do for yourself is to either sit down on the ground where your legs are level with your hips, or elevate. Best case scenario is to elevate your legs, so you're really getting some of that drain out of your feet and out of your lower legs. So if you can, even lay down, kick your feet up on the chair for a minute, 2 minutes, to help that drain come through. So beware the chair is terrible advice. Use the chair. Sit down for a moment. It can be 60 seconds, 90 seconds. If you're having a bad day, it can be 30 minutes, and that time can be spent getting you fueled, getting you recharged to go out and save your day so that you can still complete the race and still complete the goal. So don't be afraid of the chair. It's valuable time spent to sit down for a moment in a multi-hour, dozens of hours event. Use the chair. It's good advice. Okay. I think we're done. I think we got it.
Yeah.
And we're not crazy on time. This is like a reasonable episode, and we covered a lot of ground. This is awesome. Well done, team. Okay. Anything else that anybody wants to throw out there before we wrap up?
Think so.
No.
All right.
I think we covered everything.
I will just throw out, for those who are still listening, you may notice that we are dialing down the frequency of our podcasts a little bit. They're going to be coming out closer to every month as opposed to every week or every other week. So please, as we are progressing through, send us questions that you have that you would like to have answered, guests that you would be interested in hearing from. We would love to have your feedback. But no, we are bringing episodes out just about every month now from this point forward. We are all very busy people. We are all training hard ourselves in addition to coaching, and everyone else is working a full-time job in addition. So scaling back just a little bit here. But We are the More Miles Run Coaching team. We love what we do, even though it is keeping us very busy right now. So please reach out to us. You can find us at moremilestogo.com. We are all accepting new athletes right now. If you are training for late spring or summer or fall or winter events at this point, you can also find us on social media at More Miles Run Coaching, and you can find us on Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts at the More Miles Podcast. All right. Thanks for being here, guys. Enjoy the rest of your evening. We'll be back soon.
Thanks. Bye.